Hello and welcome to ReCommerce Podcast, the podcast where we talk all things circular business and re-commerce. Today we are diving into the world of reselling, so selling used items, and I'm here joined with Tuomo Laine, the CEO and co-founder of Twice Commerce, to talk about it. And maybe we can start by talking about the different business models inside reselling and selling secondhand items.
Sure. I think we can kind of do somewhat of a split in terms of where do you look to make your margin, because at the end of the day, in business, it's all about making a margin. So there are models where you kind of still, let's say, acquire cheaply and sell more expensively, maybe. So maybe you're trying to make a find, a secondhand find, and then just sell it with a margin due to, I don't know, finding a more qualified buyer or something like that. I'm trying to figure out, maybe those models are a bit rarer at scale, but maybe that could be a antique shop, for example, might operate in that way. Then we have models where you kind of acquire cheap because you might get it for free, but at the end of the day, you're kind of recovering losses. So product returns is a major supply for many secondhand sales. So retailers might do things like turn their product returns to be to be sold in an outlet corner or similar in the retail environment. IKEA, for example, is doing this in quite many places. So inside IKEA, you might find that kind of outlet corner. I think they have another name for it, but kind of the outlet corner. So these are kind of the models where you effectively just get an item and then you sell it as it is as secondhand. Now, then there are other models where you kind of try to improve your margin or you make your margin by the fact that when you acquire the supply, after the fact, you might do some things with it. You might refurbish it, you might turn it into spare parts and then rebuild, remanufacture things. So these models are, for example, refurbished phone businesses also usually work in this way. So you go to the market, you acquire some supply from an aggregator or maybe from a consumer. You might have a buyback, trading, or similar value proposition to kind of acquire the supply. And after the fact, you then do some refurbishing. You change the screens and so on. And then the combination of the spare parts, the used item, you've made it kind of as good as a new iPhone, for example, and then you sell it with a profit. So I think those are overall. Then you might say that there are also businesses in maybe recycling or remanufacturing, but maybe they go a bit outside of reselling, because there you kind of then, well, you don't resell at least to the consumer in many cases. You might resell the materials to another business in form of kind of recycling. But yeah, so that would be the cut that I have in my mind, at least for the different business models.
What are the main challenges in the resale business? Like if you are operating a resale or re-commerce business where you are selling secondhand items, either with or without refurbishing them, like what is the main challenge that you are actually facing in your business?
I think with re-commerce and resale, usually the main problem relates to supply. So it's the supply of the good, like either it's like in the first place just acquiring the supply. In small scale, maybe less so, but if you try to scale the business to be something bigger, then acquiring supply in a forecastable, systematic way can be a challenge. So it's all about kind of where can you find the supply of the goods that you need in order to do one of those models, to sell secondhand or to refurbish items and then to sell them forward. Of course, if you're a big existing retailer or brand, you kind of usually have a supply of returning goods by default, because there's, depending on your industry, you might have like 5 to even 20% product return rates, and that is your supply for then reselling and all of these different models. Then there can be more mature markets, like with electronics markets. There tends to be also already aggregators operating in that market who are aggregating supply from various different sources and then kind of pooling it together and then selling it to a reseller. So for example, with phones, that is a quite established market. So that's the first thing, like where do I acquire my supply? As part of that, then this again depends a bit on product verticals, but one could say that a challenge might be the quality of the supply in terms of, let's say, how good is the supplier in declaring what it is. So especially if you're looking to acquire supply from consumers, there tends to be, like, usually it ends up being so that the consumer needs to declare when they're at home, they're looking at an item, sending it to you, like, what is this? And consumers aren't the best at recognizing or remembering whether this is an iPhone 13 or iPhone 14. So this might be a friction point if you're running a resale model where you promise, for example, a cashback or some kind of discount dependent on the value of the good that you bring in. So that might be one of the things that you need to kind of figure out. Either you invest a bit in software or other solutions to improve the quality of the declaration in general, or then you might kind of mitigate this with your overall value proposition that you promise to revisit, or you're going to say that we're going to revisit the, for example, valuation of the item once you get it. So your initial promise of $100 of buyback value can go down to 20 when you learn that it actually wasn't the iPhone, 15, but it was iPhone 12, something like that.
That sounds like a potential issue for the end consumer if they are kind of promised a higher price and then end up actually going down, which I assume is usually that way around, not usually that, hey, it's actually iPhone 15 and here is double the money. But
I think those things where you have an item that tends to become more expensive than the original owner assumed tend to be news like, hey, someone learned that their painting that they thought was worthless ended up being super expensive. And it's kind of the same thing happening, but maybe in a different scale. So in that kind of antique, like you have that honest antique shopper who tells you or the pawn shop situation where
and those are more like collectibles maybe rather than actually like daily use items.
Exactly. But yeah, so those are, I think, the main friction points that someone might have that they look to then solve via software or then via other like operational models. I think there are a few larger retailers who then, for their product category and the way how they operate, it might make more sense. Instead of promising cashback, you kind of promise a discount from a next purchase. So I think IKEA does that. I believe, if I don't remember wrong, I think Best Buy does that. So I think that is a way where, from the business perspective, the kind of take-back program becomes a way of retaining customers and kind of pushing and incentivizing the customer towards their next sale.
Yeah, and I guess that
next
can
purchase,
be
yeah.
I guess that can be in terms of like credits and so on. I think a lot of fashion brands do that nowadays, that you get like in-store credits or similar. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that I believe that over time will scale even more, because then we've now discussed the idea that you acquire back a product that you can sell as it is or refurbish it and then sell it. But in some for some players, it might even be just acquiring back the material. If they are highly integrated in their manufacturing chain, then they can kind of use that as a material to remanufacture, for example, fabrics and so on. So, and with electronics, there is real value in many of the components. So if you are recycling the batteries or valuable metals, there is actual resale value that the retailer can then have a extra revenue stream on.
And that sounds like a quite a maybe not easy way, but kind of logical way even for linear retailers to actually jump into the circular commerce if the incentive is kind of aligned with their current business. So it might be giving them 20% discount on their next purchase where they actually have enough margin to still make money on it. So
yeah, definitely. Like my gut feeling is that if you're an existing retailer or maybe direct-to-consumer brand, cashback probably isn't the way how to start for it. How to start reselling. It should be this kind of a discount towards your next purchase, or some other loyal credit points, or whatever your kind of loyalty system is. There's two things that you can achieve there. There's the fact that you have retention, you kind of establish a relationship with the customers, end up visiting your store virtually or physically more. And then you can achieve the fact that you get the stuff back, so you can decide whether you recycle it or what you do with it. But you kind of establish this flow, almost like a servitized flow, and ongoing relationship. Now, cashback, I think, works for aggregator brands that then acquire their supply from, kind of constantly acquire supply almost from like new consumers. So if you were to now enter the, let's say, phone refurbishment business, and you need to establish a brand, so your brand is that we buy and sell, or we buy old, iPhones, and we sell them as repaired, good as new. Now there you might have to promise a cashback program, because then your kind of buying customers or the seller wouldn't probably like, why would I have a discount in your brand that I'm not even sure whether I'm yet wanna buy anything from. But if you're Walmart, you can be pretty sure that the consumers likely are going to buy something from you over the next year.
So it's already a little bit about the brand trust and kind of the existing relationship with that, and might be challenging for new entrants to come there and promise credits for something.
Yeah, it's like,
familiar with
you
that,
get credits to, Tuomo's retail store, and you don't even have an idea what do I sell, but yeah.
Absolutely. And maybe also a couple words about the logistics side, so reverse logic, so actually getting that used item from the consumer to your business. I assume there is some challenges in that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's it's a complex topic, but on a high level, I would say that it all starts from the fact that, again, how valuable is the item? So it's harder to get a €5 item back to you to you from a consumer to you as a single piece, because it's so thin the margin that you almost kind of lose all of that to the logistics cost. Now, let's say that if you make $40 for the item, like on profit, well, then you can start maybe investing a bit more in ways of getting that item from the consumer. Technically, at that scale, if you have a huge revenue, you might even be able to actually just collect the stuff from the people's homes. So if you have a well-established setup where UPS is, for example, running, some of the logistics providers already kind of provide these services that they kind of, as they bring something new, they can take old back, or then they just can do that reverse logistics side of things. But yeah, so the challenges there really relates to like how much is it servitized in your area already by the logistics companies, and what is the cost of that, and whether that matches the average margins you have. Then if it doesn't, you have to just increase the volume. So if you're taking back, T-shirts or old clothes, you might need to kind of then increase the volume of a single pickup to make it more feasible, or then start establishing some kind of big, logistics centers or kind of collection boxes where you can take stuff back. But yeah, it is a combination of what is the item, what is the size, what is the shipping cost of that, how well is it servitized, and then it goes back to the declaration side of things. That if you try to run all of this, somehow like that you have warehouse, how much can I trust in your declaration of what did you send me and the condition of that. The condition creating is also hard for many people.
Maybe a couple of words about that a little bit later, maybe like on the reverse logic side, you mentioned like the size and the value, and is that's probably the reason why there are like iPhone refurbished businesses more than like TV refurbished businesses, because it's a lot of value in a small box that is quite cheap to actually.
There's kind of there's that and a few more things, but yeah, it's like how much value can you pack into that square meter or whatever, square centimeter or cubicle. So it's kind of how much value do you have tied into that item, and then there's also a question on the other side that if you are making your business in selling it secondhand or maybe refurbishing it then selling it, is that how well does the item hold its shelf value? So what is your assumption that once you get an item in, how quickly you can sell it out? So let's keep using a phone example. If I buy phones, but my business would be such that I end up selling it in 3 years, the resale value of that plummets. So even that shelf value is kind of eating out the margin also. So you're trying to find, especially if you're an aggregator. So for retailers, I think it's a little bit of different ball game. But if you're trying to kind of enter the market with a niche, buying old music instruments, reselling them, it's a question of how well does that instrument hold its value if you have to store it for half a year or a year. So I think that's also a big part of the equation there.
Absolutely, and I assume in like warehousing it's pretty similar to actual like linear retail businesses. It's like how fast are you able to get rid of the existing inventory, and of course the size once again, like if it's TVs that is worth $400 and you have a bunch of them, it's quite different than if you have iPhones that are
exactly so. And let's say if you have Apple products that you refurbish, Apple products tend to hold their value really well. They tend to be quite small, so it's an excellent product for refurbishing. But that's the kind of the equation there that at the end of the day. But I think this is where it becomes even more important for anyone doing these kind of business models to have a software setup that follows their inventory quite closely. So you need to know each one of your items individually. I don't think it's even enough to have, let's say, 4 SKUs for grade A, grade B, grade C, you need to know each one of those items. You need to, once you've done the heavy lifting of checking the declaration, inspecting it, doing the grading and conditioning, pricing the value of that, you need to kind of follow your inventory on a single article level, have some assumption on the shelf value in order to know like what kind of campaigns to push to the market. Because the granularity and individuality of your inventory and becomes complex, but not impossible. Like for modern software, it should be quite easy job to help you out there, but you need to do it anyhow. It's kind of following everything individually, their value and condition. And then if you take it to extreme, you can even figure out like, okay, what's the value of the spare parts that I could get out of this? So I think there's in YouTube, publicly available, this the channel Smarter Every Day did an episode of a Finnish company called Kamerastore, and they buy analog cameras and then they kind of refurbish them. And in that video, you can see their warehouse, and they have hundreds of thousands of small spare parts because they know that the value of those spare parts is also quite high because the companies don't anymore even manufacture these models. So it's this kind of thing that you have the foresight of going kind of deeper than the actual product, going to the spare part level and maybe valuing and following your inventory even on that level.
Well, that's interesting. Interesting topic. How the software layer helps there, and maybe quick word about also the inventory. You mentioned that it's not enough if you have like SKU per grade, but is there any time when you see that you have maybe identified like different categories that you have like the grading? So you might have like the performance, the battery life, and if there is any scratches on, if we're talking about iPhones, is it good idea to kind of combine those into SKUs, or what's the benefit if you actually have every single item as like individual? Is it that there is like, basically there is no two similar used items? Or
well, yeah, I think, and someone, if there's someone listening from the retail, like with a lot more experience than I do, can correct me. But one of the things that I think that what SKU helps and how it's used in many times is that I have a catalog as a merchant or a retailer, and then I say that for this item I need something from my inventory, and then I've mapped my inventory with SKU, so stock keeping units. And then that works super well if all of my items are new and comparable to each other. So it's a nice way of connecting your inventory tracking. Now, in the examples where what we discussed, it might be that these 3 individual items that are all a bit different in condition or value can fulfill a similar promise. So I might still kind of do my catalog in terms of, like, let's say that this is a grade A product, grade B product, grade C, grade D. But then in my inventory side of things, I can say that for grade A product, I need a product that is graded in between this thing, or whose value is between this thing. So the linkage between the catalog and inventory can become a bit more complex. But then that frees you from the kind of trouble of having to somehow forcefully say that your inventory follows some kind of a SKU structure. All of a sudden you can kind of have a extremely flexible relationship between these two things. So your inventory tracking, you can do granularly, understand the value of everything. You could still attach SKU codes to each one of those articles as a way of referencing. So that's kind of, I think, the main difference is that you need individual tracking, but then you can have these codes or categorizations that you use relationally to other like product information systems or similar, that then kind of cascade to storefronts as a product page with some selection that makes sense for your customer type.
And I guess that also kind of brings in the flexibility, like if you are having the item and you kind of have to force it into these categories, like changing that, it actually, you probably have to go through the whole inventory again. But if you have like the specifics there, then you can kind of change the logic and test different ones.
And it can even, I think it can, like, the more flexible the relationship, you can even have a lot more fun in productization, because then you can kind of productize, like point to the same items from 5 different kind of ways, and somehow kind of eat the inventory from different value propositions. So I think that's the interesting part, that it frees it up a little bit, and you have this slight separation of concerns that, hey, this is how I try to commercialize, this is how I track my inventory and maximize the profits out of it. And then this relational logic here is often quite connected to my efficiency and all of that. And that's where the software companies like us should aim to help the merchants, that they can focus on just like keeping track of inventory, making sure that the value of that is increasing over time, and then the catalog flexibility, and then helping them automate and do the kind of linkage between these two.
And I assume there is also quite difference, like the purchase price might be actually also different than if there is some refurbishment done per item, and able to kind of track that as well.
Yeah.
So it's on the other side of, maybe on the inventory calculation, like how much this item that I'm selling might be same priced for the end consumer, but the actual history might be that I purchased different price. There might be some, I changed some part of it. Or
so it is really like getting into, like, the more you start to scale your operation, the more important it becomes to have visibility or kind of a continuous audit record to the life cycle of that individual item. that how much did a person spend time inspecting it, how much did a person spend time refurbishing it, what spare parts they put in, like getting that trail, because it's rarely like you can try to standardize as much as you can, but the source of improving your standardization of the process depends on getting that feedback, that how is it going right now. So having that, having either a software or having a way of storing that into the inventory information, assumption of the efficiency there is a way for you to kind of continuously develop your operation, because that's kind of, I believe a big part of businesses is trying to figure out how to be more efficient, lean, and
absolutely.
and mean.
And I guess there is also maybe some valuable insights there that are not available if you don't actually track it. So there might be that these parts that are maybe broken more often than that, but you might actually have like a really cheap way to solve that, and then you might actually like specialized in purchasing items that are actually in like bad condition. Like I think once again, just thinking about iPhones as an example. So if you have like a broken screen, it's a huge deal for the user. But if you have like an operation that is actually very cheap and efficient to replace it, that might be that, hey, I'm actually just trying to find all the phones that have broken screens in the whole world.
Yeah, definitely, and it's a lot of insights that you can get there. Also, if we just look into, for example, product returns, and all of these examples apply, I think, even more if you are a brand or retailer who manufactures their goods themselves or kind of are in close loop of that. So let's say that you get product returns, and then you do this kind of recording of what was the condition and where was the damage and whatnot. All of that data can then be used in your product manufacturing and product design to figure out how do we improve our product, because that should be kind of the source of revenue in the first place, that you have a well-performing product against the standards that you consider to be well-performing. Now, that one is super important, and then like the other aspects that you mentioned, that like once you get the information on like how is it broken, you can optimize other parts. And then it might be, even if let's say you're just a general retailer that you buy all of your stuff, if you've made the job of tracking every item and making sure that you also track not what brand this was, but from who did I buy it, or if you, in best case, you can even, the traceability can go to the place that which manufacturing plant actually has manufactured this good. So there might be a plant in country A, country B, country C, all manufacturing against the same spec. So they should be comparable, but they probably aren't. So then if you start to get product returns, and you can kind of start tracking that all of the plant C, manufacturing C products have a fault here, it might be the source of kind of improving that operation. Of course, that is assuming that you are kind of quite vertically integrated to have the power to do that. Maybe we can direct it via purchasing, all of that. But just as an example, like if you zoom out even more and look into the total supply chain, the more trackability you have on an individual level rather than an aggregated SKU, the more you have, again, ways of optimizing for end user quality.
And that kind of sounds like data that usually companies don't actually have. Like once they sell it and it leaves their store, they probably don't actually like have any data on that afterwards. So I think buyback programs, trading programs are actually opening this type of new data.
Definitely, I think, yeah, or if they've had the data, I think in many cases they have like secondary information. They have like product ratings. So then from there they might get a signal that, hey, the customers aren't really happy with the product, so it's breaking down or whatever. Or then if they have some data, they've aggregated it to too big of a chunk. So instead of following things on an individual level, they have a quite big blob of like something's wrong here, but the actionability can stay quite low.
That's very interesting, and probably something that a lot of retailers or manufacturers actually would appreciate quite a lot to get that data in.
I would imagine so.
Yeah. But yeah, very, very interesting. maybe now diving into like the more positive side of things, and kind of like how do you see the role of software, and how do you actually see like the whole operation going, and ideally like what is the software helping them to do? And I guess it's kind of starts from receiving the item and starting to grade, and kind of already having that information put into, and how that information kind of travels with the product all the way to maybe selling it, reselling it, or maybe reselling it multiple times.
Yeah, I think trying to again simplify, I think it's like we can start with the assumption that I have an empty inventory and an empty warehouse now. So if I have a digital software, that table is empty, I have nothing there, I have 0 items in my inventory. Now I go to the world and I say that, hey, I'm in the market of getting stuff back, or buying them out from you. Now people engage with the offer, and then they say that I have some stuff that I'm willing to send you. Now, the question is that how good are we at digitizing that item, kind of coming up with like the declaration of what it is, what's the condition, and maybe a guess of what would be its aftermarket value. 5 years ago, that's essentially someone filling out a form, trying to, maybe you have some catalog and trying to map it and against it and so on. And then you getting it and then looking at that form submission, and then looking at the item, and then having a person that is professional at doing that and seeing whether that matches, correcting the stuff, and then some computer maybe calculating a better aftermarket value for it based on scraping websites of the world of what's the value of this. Nowadays, this is where I feel that AI is a hugely beneficial thing. Anyone can try this at home. Just open up ChatGPT or whatever your language model is. Open up, give it a photo of a product at your home and ask it, what is it, and can you grade it and give a price estimate for it. It does an extremely good job, and it will do an increasingly better job going forward. So the declaration of what things are is becoming easier. And it becomes even easier if it's somehow supported by the retailer with some catalog data or similar for the language model. So instead of having to fill a form and doing that, we're going to a world where it's as easy as snapping a photo or taking a video of a bunch of items. And that's the way of kind of digitizing the rows to your inventory, that, hey, these might be coming in. So I think that's a big part of the software, like AI and computer vision and all of that can do a huge amount of heavy lifting there. And then you have, let's say, 80% correct, or in some cases 100 if it's a IKEA lac table there. It's probably easier to spot. But after that, then the software's actually kind of main job is to support that whatever your process is, depending on your business case, how granular you have to be, is to be the place where you record the information. So every item needs to have a kind of a ledger of what has happened, what does a cost attached to that, and the time that it took, because then it kind of, at scale, you can start looking into your operation via that ledger. But that's what I would say is the main part. And then you can imagine that originally empty inventory table is starting to fill with rows, which is comparable to the complexity of your inventory. You start to have a value in your inventory. That value is connected from the idea that, hey, we've identified this item to be this. From that point on, there's plethora of stuff that software can do. But maybe one thing might be that just follow the aftermarket for trends, and saying that, all right, hey, for whatever reason, this item is peaking. So then it becomes this kind of again, something that I think has been done in the market before, but now it's maybe coming from a bit different perspective and so on.
All right, and after you have inventory full of unique items. For example, in Twice Commerce, like what happens then when you have these individual items and now you have to kind of start selling them? Like, do you just post all of them? Like, if you have 100 phones that are very similar, I think you already mentioned about some SKU grouping, some kind of logic, like how does that actually work with these individual items? I guess for consumers it's not maybe nice to look at 100 similar looking, like in the same grade, and try to find some errors or difference in the photos, but how do you actually package those and make them
depends on the
available?
consumer. I think for average consumer, no, but maybe I know you might enjoy actually going through that table. But I think that then it becomes the art of how do you sell. So it's a different thing what something actually is and then what you sell. And that's the art of your brand and knowing your customers, that what kind of service, what kind of information they enjoy. Is it more important who was the previous owner then, or is it more important of like which chip model something has, or does it have scratches on it or not? So it is extremely dependent on your brand and what do you represent to your customers. But it becomes the job of building a catalog. So it's just like, what is the offering that you can get from me? And then you can say that, hey, I might have a catalog item called bikes in excellent condition. Then I might go to a level that here are slightly used Canyon bikes and so on. And for each one of these, I defined, in order to fulfill this promise, what do I need from my inventory? And that can be as simple as saying that anything that has a SKU code of something, or you can go extremely granular, saying that anything where the resale value is between this, where the color is either A, B, or C, where the model is X, Y, or Z. So I think that's what we are now in the new version that we're launching. That's the main kind of idea, that the flexibility of that. So it becomes the job. I have my inventory, then the job is the art of selling, of like what is your offering and how do you package your catalog. And if you're, it depends really on your customer base. I've seen like if in some markets, if your customer base are like semi-professional hobbyists, they might want extremely granular information because that's why they shop from you. If you're selling to less, let's say, deep-end customer in a niche, then you might generalize. And there's benefits to both. The hobbyist might be willing to pay actually more in order to know extremely detailed information. In the same way, the general consumer might be actually willing to pay more just for the fact that they're not willing to spend the time to do their due diligence. So they're willing to accept more vagueness in the value promise.
That's very, very interesting, and it sounds like the flexibility is very important there. So that, like, if you are already forced into when you are doing the grading, when you are actually receiving it, if you are just saying like this is A2, and after that, if you want to kind of change it or you want to maybe offer that more granular view into that, it might be actually difficult if you don't have like all the data available and then the flexibility to kind of re-catalog or create those products or
change becomes harder because then you don't know, like over time you don't know what you aggregated under a single entity. So I think this is like, and the why things are like this is understandable because many of the ways of doing commerce has been established before digitalization and all of that. Now in a world where AI might be facilitating a lot of things, is capable of going through mass amounts of individualized data and to make recommendations, even to sell it to consumers in a concierge way, making great deals, the granularity and understandability of your data becomes even more important. So the more that, let's say, an AI agent, for example, can try to find edge for you in saying that, okay, I'll be out of those 1 million different items we have sitting in the warehouse, now that I'm talking with Karri, it can kind of continuously go through all of those and figure out that that's the perfect fit for you in terms of what we're looking for as a seller and what you're looking for as a buyer. And then they can reserve some of the other items for other people. So it is this kind of, I think, a world where at least I believe that we can go is that everything is a lot more individualized, a lot more specialized, since the facilitation of sales might happen via AI agent that doesn't have a problem of actually like personally knowing a inventory full of tens of millions of items and helping you find the exactly best for you.
Yeah, maybe as a final step is then like how to step into this world if you are, let's say first that you're a new entrepreneur and you want to start doing this reselling business, or maybe as a existing retailer selling new items, like how do you actually jump into this space if you want to start it out?
Well, yeah, so I think there's probably two ways. If you're a new entrepreneur, any new business, it's always the first thing that you should do is to make sure that is there demand in the market. So like set up a website or your corner store or whatever, the Facebook group or whatever your way of reaching your potential audience for your offering, and then kind of start selling. I think that's the first step. So you should always make sure that you have the demand for it. Then you can establish a website you can establish on top of Wix.com in 2 minutes at best. Then if you get once you get your first sales in, then you can start figuring out okay, there are tools like us, like you can install Twice Commerce, for example, in Wix, or then just use as a standalone, whatever. Then you can kind of track the operation side of things. And then you can kind of trust that there should be commerce software like us and others that can help you scale even from your first sale to billions. But yeah, that would be it. I would probably start as a new entrepreneur figuring out the demand, and then where do I get my supply. That if I start selling my dad's old, I don't know, vinyl records from my garage, I will at some point run out of supply. So then maybe at the same time figuring out where might I find more and so on. But I think these entrepreneurs that engage in this they are usually already kind of somehow engaged in a community where they are doing this. Okay, so then if you're an established retailer and you don't do any re-commerce yet, probably the easiest friction is to start turning your product returns into resales. So maybe in your stores have a small outlet corner, or if not, if you don't want to assign kind of real estate for that outlet corner in physical store, once you get product returns, have a extremely lightweight process of doing that identification, and then have in your online store a section for those products. That's again something where a company like us, we can help you do that. But that would be the kind of ways to get into it. If you are a company that has already capabilities around, if you're providing repair services, for example, for your customers, it should be even easier, because then those people that are doing the repairs are the same. They have the capabilities that are needed in order to identify or even refurbish some of the product returns towards a refurbed sale.
So maybe companies that are actually currently operating in maintenance fixing part might actually be in a really good place to kind of...
Well, yeah, you have customers coming in saying that I need this repaired. That's kind of your supply already. You can start offering ideas that, hey, I can buy it out from you, and then establishing a source for the replace sale, whether it's another refurbished model that you have, or maybe even a new sale from a manufacturer. But if you have know-how of how to repair or maintain specific product category, you entering re-commerce market is a quite logical step.
But hey, thank you for your time and a really good discussion about it. It's very, very interesting stuff. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Karri.